Hi, I'm Dave Kale. Welcome to this Christian Business Insights podcast show where my goal is to provide you with practical, actionable ideas to help you create businesses and careers of excellence and at the same time multiply your influence for the kingdom. I have been a Christian in business for over 30 years, and I have personally and contractually consulted with over 500 different sales organizations. So in these podcasts, I combine the lessons that I have learned with an out-of-the-box experience and perspective on Christianity that you will find challenging. And we put that together to provide you with practical insights and ideas that you can use to live better and lead better. Welcome to the journey. Hi, this is Dave. So are your systems obsolete? And I know you're thinking, well, of course not. I'm keeping everything up to date. Well, let's see. One of my key issues that I've been talking about and writing about for 20 years is the pace of change. Things in our world today are changing at a pace that is unprecedented in human history. And the bottom line is, if we're not changing ourselves and our organizations at least as rapidly as the world is around us, we're falling behind. And that's what I want to focus on today, business systems and how that relates to our businesses. Recently, following a request made by a client, I compiled a list of the 25 most important lessons I've learned in my 30-plus years of working with over 500 different organizations as a B2B sales expert and Christian business thought leader. And in no particular order, I'm beginning to transfer them to podcast. And this is one. And it's this. Well, one of the 25 most important lessons I've learned, this is it. If you're going to succeed in these rapidly changing times, we need to adapt new strategies and disciplines that keep us and our organizations changing along with the pace of change around us. It is unfortunately true that most of the policies and procedures that dictate our activities on a day-to-day basis are vestiges of days gone by. They were designed to be effective in a world that no longer exists. In other words, most business systems teeter on being obsolete. Let me illustrate. So one of the projects that I'm often called on to do is examine a company's sales compensation plan. Okay, and almost inevitably, when I ask why they have the plan that they have, the answer is, because it's the plan we have. In other words, the only reason for the plan is history. At some point in the past, someone designed the plan to accomplish something, and the rationale has been lost. The situation it was designed for has long since faded away, but the plan remains. And since then, it's been easier to deal with day-to-day issues than it is to redesign a piece of the company's infrastructure. So it's just easier to get along with things than it is to really take a look at some of these, what I call infrastructure, key processes and practices and procedures. Now, that's often the situation with sales compensation plans, but it is not unique to them. That's just one example of a situation that impacts all kinds of organizational systems. When I look at the other fundamental infrastructure elements, and by that I mean the policies and the procedures that dictate daily activity, almost all of them have the same history. They were created at some time in the past by other people for a long-gone situation. And as such, they can rarely be defended as effective. They're not strategically effective, they just are. And since these are the tracks upon which much of the company's efforts run, their effectiveness is crucial to the organization's success. So here's a little self-test. Test yourself. When was the last time you questioned the design of the basic policies and procedures in your business? Now, Here are some of the most common from my work, but again, there's a whole world of others. But in my work, when was the last time you questioned and designed the way that prospects are created and qualified, or even if they are? When was the last time you looked at the way new customers were created? When was the last time you looked at the way customers are encouraged to become repeat buyers? When was the last time you examined the way partners are developed and nurtured? How about very specific things? The way orders are processed, the way invoices are created, the way people report to their supervisors, the way supervisors manage their teams, the way bills are paid, the way invoices are collected, the way strategy is determined, the way new products are developed. See, you can go on and on. These are core processes, core procedures. And for the most part, from my experience, they were designed years ago for a different situation by different people. Your organizational systems are composed of processes, principles, practices, and tools, and those most likely have been created at some time in the past and are vestiges of days gone by. So here's the problem. Since much of the infrastructure was created for a different time and a different situation, and since the infrastructure dictates the behavior of the folks who work within it, much of the company's efforts are not nearly as effective as they could be. You with me on that? Okay. And left untouched, this will eventually render the organization obsolete. So here's a solution, something that I've been doing for years. Number one, identify the key components. So you don't have to look at every little process and procedure, but there are ones that are key, that are important. And I create a list. I have a list. I call it my punch list of key systems components. And this list exists on two levels. The first level is the fundamental activities the organization must be successful with if it is to continue. So in my business, I have identified 6 key activities. All right, let me give you an example. So here's one of my key activities. I have 6. Number 1, expose people to the sales content. Nudge them to pursue excellence and influence so they can sell better and lead better. And we primarily do this by creating and publishing our content as broadly as possible. So, on my list of key components, key activities, is this: expose people to the sales content. All right? That's a level 1. So I have 6 key activities like that, and 6, maybe 10 is probably a good number to start with. Again, you can't list everything, but list the most important things. And the second level then is composed of the key practices, policies, and tools that support the first level. So, for example, under the key activity of exposing people to sales content, okay, how do we do that? What are some of the tools? What are some of the practices? What are some of the policies? Well, we have a list of potential publishers and distributors of our content. Okay, when was the last time we examined that list? You see what I mean? And then we have our processes for posting to our blogs. I do 2 blogs. We have a process for posting to them. We have a process for distributing content through our newsletters, and we have a process for submitting content to other publishers. All of those are very specific things that support the key activity. You following me? Okay. So, step 1 is create a list of the most important key components in your business. What are the things that you absolutely must do if you're going to survive and thrive? Then, step 2, examine the items on the list on a regular and recurring basis. So again, I got them on a spreadsheet, and I keep a date as to the one when we last examined that item. And I don't have any definitive schedule. I don't say every 6 months or something like that. I just keep the dates and the items on a spreadsheet, and when I have time or my staff has time, we'll take a look and pick something off that hasn't been looked at for a while. And we note on the spreadsheet those items that have been a while since we last examined them. And when I say examine, what I mean is we look critically at that item and we ask these questions. Are we doing this as effectively as we could be? What are the best practices for this process? What can we change, add, or subtract from in order to be more effective? Now, so let me just go back to my example here. So our key activity is expose people to the sales content. Okay, some of the tools and processes, our list of potential publishers and distributors of our content. Okay, so we take that out and say, are we doing this as effectively as we could be? Are there people we don't know about who should be on the list, or some of these should be off the list? So we examine that. Another item that supports that is our processes for posting to our blogs. So we have a process, it's a written process. We say, are we doing this as effectively as we could be? What are the best practices for this? Is there a better way to do this? What can we change or add to or subtract from in order to be more effective? And we just very methodically go through each of the items and ask those questions. And in that, maybe our answer is, yep, we're doing it perfectly. Okay, good. Then we just note the date, and we'll look at it again, when time comes up. Or it could be that we've identified some things we could do better. And so we modify the tools, we modify the process, we modify the policies, whatever it is, and note the date that we did it, and then move on. Now, sometimes we do this as a team, and sometimes I do it myself, and sometimes I delegate it to one of my associates. The point is that the item, the key activity, is being critically examined by someone on a regular basis. Now, this process of constantly looking at the key pieces, the infrastructure in our business, this process ensures that our systems are working as effectively as they can be, at least on a very realistic basis. I mean, we can't take the time to look at everything every day, so we put in place a system that allows us to do that. The process then prevents us from being rendered obsolete or irrelevant by depending on decisions made in the past for a different situation. My experience as a consultant, again, working with over 500 different organizations, is many of the key components of your structure are legacies of days gone by. It's time to brush them off and look at them. So this regular systems component review is one of the disciplines that will help us change with the pace of change around us. And I'd recommend everybody do it. Remember, it's one of the 25 most important lessons that I've learned, and that is almost all of the policies and procedures that dictate our day-to-day efforts are vestiges of years gone by. We can't allow that to continue. Okay, that's it. We're done. Bye-bye.